wedding and my
Ellie,
plans.
I don't understand. What did you mean by...
Look, no one has to do anything. When the time comes, I'll do everything. I mean everything.
Actually, Elizabeth was allowed to do very little. MGM, eager to promote the film, literally took over the wedding, turning it into a publicity extravaganza, with cameras whirring and 600 guests, many of them, including Elizabeth, dressed in studio gowns. And so, on May 13th, 1950, wearing a dress stitched by 15 seamstresses working full-time for 8 weeks, Elizabeth Taylor, barely out of high school, married for the first time.
We're going as many places as we can, and I certainly am looking forward to it.
Sadly, the honeymoon, along with a few of Elizabeth's illusions, was virtually over as soon as it began.
He had a hair-trigger temper that was well known in Hollywood. He was a very heavy drinker. On their honeymoon on the Queen Mary, he left her alone in their suite to gamble all night and drink. Here was, the most desired young woman in America, and she's sitting alone on her honeymoon, waiting for her husband. Plus, she had this very adolescent idea about love and marriage. She saw herself in an organdy apron, fixing dinner for her husband in a vine-covered cottage. She was completely unprepared for the demands of marriage on any level.
Liz put up a good front when she returned from Europe.
Hello, everybody. I'd like you to meet my new dog, Bonko. He's 3 months old, and he's a true Frenchman. Won't you say hello in French? Bonko. Bonko.
But the marriage was already on the rocks, and in a matter of months, Elizabeth and Nicky would be separated. Liz, who was breaking away from her studio image and world, would not remain single for long. Elizabeth Taylor and Nicky Hilton, the most famous newlyweds in the world, separated in December 1950, just months after they married. 18 years old, hurt and confused, Elizabeth threw herself into a series of rebound relationships, developing an intense friendship with Montgomery Clift, her co-star in A Place in the Sun, and launching into an affair with Stanley Donen, a married man who was directing her in the mockingly titled Love is Better Than Ever. Worried about scandal, MGM packed her off to England for her next film. Almost immediately, Elizabeth struck up a romance with 39-year-old British actor Michael Wilding. Barely a year after her divorce, and not yet 20 years old, she tied the knot for the second time.
Well, of course I am. I'm very glad.
Once again, the marriage was a virtual mob scene, and the bride and groom had to fight their way out of the chapel through a crush of reporters and fans. Relatively speaking, Elizabeth's marriage to Wilding turned out to be one of her longer and more successful runs.
He was a much older man. She sort of, I think, played out the role of the young matron housewife with him. She had her sons with him. She was trying to live up to his age. She was still in her early 20s, and she was living like a 40-year-old wife would.
He was a very important marriage for her because she had 2 wonderful children by him, Michael and Christopher Wilding. And I think that she would give him high marks and sentimental pluses because of that alone.
With marriage and motherhood taking up most of her time, Elizabeth did little of note as an actress until 1955, when she teamed with Rock Hudson and James Dean in Giant.
I guess you're about the best-looking gal we've seen around here in a long time.
The role was a stretch, calling on Taylor to age 50 years. Rounding into form as an actress, she pulled it off and got the best reviews of her career. Giant was also important on a personal level, as Taylor developed passionate, if doomed, friendships with her co-stars. Just days after finishing his work on Giant and getting a farewell Siamese kitten from Liz, 24-year-old James Dean died when he slammed his silver Porsche into the side of another car. A year later, while filming Raintree County, Montgomery Clift almost died in a car crash after leaving a dinner party at the Taylor home. Liz, among the first to the scene, reportedly pulled Clift's teeth out of his throat to keep him from choking, and held his head in her lap until an ambulance arrived. Taylor was less successful coming to the rescue of her marriage with Wilding, the embers of which had been burning out for years. The studio, still acting out the parental role, announced their separation on July 19, 1956. They had been married 4 years. The next day, she got a call from flamboyant producer Mike Todd, a 47-year-old self-made millionaire who had met Taylor weeks earlier at a party on his yacht. Todd told her flat out that he loved her and intended to marry her.
Mike Todd was this, amazing, blustering, sexy, wild guy that was produced shows on a shoestring, had gone through bankruptcy, always had fabulous women in his life. He just bowled Elizabeth Taylor over.
He was very rebellious sort of guy who always went against the grain, and he taught her to be that way. She's quite different after she was married to Mike Todd. He said audacity makes the star, and she began to live by that motto.
They married in Acapulco on February 2nd, 1957, one day after Liz and Wilding divorced. Todd's closest friend, singer Eddie Fisher, was best man. Fisher's wife, Debbie Reynolds, was matron of honor. Elizabeth, a bride 3 times, was 24 years old. 3 times, it seemed, was the charm. Liz and Todd's affection for each other was obvious as they spent a year traveling promoting Todd's Around the World in 80 Days. When the movie won Best Picture Oscar in 1957, Todd seemed more thrilled with his wife than the award.
This, sweetheart, proves beyond a question of a doubt that it's better to be lucky than smart, to win the 2 biggest prizes in Hollywood in 1 year. This and this.
Well, I think you're smarter than you're lucky.
Oh, well, you're partial.
We're going to have a baby. I think that's exciting, too.
That's an understatement. Can you imagine? I don't know. I hope I live through all this because everything is so exciting.
Elizabeth's 3rd child, Liza Todd, was 7 months old when Liz began filming Cat on a Hot Tin Roof with Paul Newman and Burl Ives. A few weeks into the production, Todd had to fly to New York to receive an award. Taylor had intended to go with him, but was prevented by a last-minute bout with the flu. It was an illness that wound up saving her life. Mike Todd boarded the Liz for his trip to New York on March 22nd, 1958.
Mike Todd left Elizabeth Taylor in Hollywood because she had a virus and flew to his death in an isolated mountain valley 22 miles southwest of Grants, New Mexico.
And in this home in California, Mike Todd's widow, actress Elizabeth Taylor, makes tearful preparations to journey to Chicago, where Todd will be buried tomorrow. The beautiful Mrs. Todd sobbed, "I wish I had gone with him."
The saddest moment of her life was when Mike Todd died. That was a very great shock to her. I was in the hospital visiting a friend of mine, and over the loudspeaker, I heard somebody say, "If there's a Sidney Gilleroff in the hospital, will you quickly go to Miss Taylor's home? It's urgent." And then I rushed there, only to find she was in a state of collapse. They couldn't leave her alone, and there was no point in putting a nurse with her, because she was sedated, and when she'd wake up, she'd start to scream.
I feel all the time like a cat on a hot tin roof.
Then jump off the roof, Maggie, jump off it.
After a month, Liz returned to work on Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. The Tennessee Williams play about tortured desire provided a cathartic outlet for Liz, who attacked her role with steamy, almost wrathful intensity.
Maggie, the cat is alive! I'm alive!
The film, along with her next 2, Suddenly Last Summer and Butterfield 8, marked a turning point for Taylor. A shift in her image from alluring niceness to honest, almost angry sensuality. Her marriage to Mike Todd and the death of Mike Todd seemed to liberate something in Liz, who now allowed stronger, darker, more complicated and dangerous emotions to pour through, both on and off the screen.